There we go. Thank you. We'll get started in 1 second. Very appreciative of everyone calling in today. Recognizing that there's a lot of profound decisions being made and challenging situations in the world right now. So appreciative of everyone taking the time to be part of this conversation as we're working to create opportunities within the larger food system for equity for folks to be able to participate and engage with institutions who are helping to feed some of our most vulnerable communities. Let's see. I think we're trying to get up our PowerPoint here, and we'll get going in 1 second. There we go. So again, welcome to the Buyer Supplier Mixer for the virtual day today, and also excited for Monday's in-person event at the Experimental Station on Monday. Welcome, bienvenidos to our session today. Now I'm going to hand it off to our interpreters, and I'm Roger Cooley, Executive Director of the Chicago Food Policy Council, Action Council. But I want to hand it off to our interpreters who are going to go through the transition to Spanish interpretation as well as transcription. So I'll hand it off to Letty.
Hola, muy bienvenidos a todos. Buenos días. Estamos yo y mi compañera Leti, que vamos a ser sus intérpretes en el canal de español. Tenemos interpretación para cada sesión. Al ingresar una sesión, verá la notificación de los servicios de interpretación van a estar disponibles en todas las sesiones. Por favor de hacer un clic en el icono del globo. Después va a elegir las interpretaciones de idiomas disponibles o si lo prefieren, simplemente desactivar la función. También vamos a tenemos los servicios de sustitutos en inglés para cada sesión. Al ingresar una sesión, verá la notificación de los servicios de sustitutos están disponibles. Por favor de hacer un clic en el icono CC para elegir mostrar sustitutos. Y allí va a ver que va a estar completada. Si quiere modificar la configuración de los sustitutos, ahí los puede hacer también. Bienvenidos nuevamente, sus servidoras yo, Leticia y Leti, vamos a estar en el otro canal de español. Disfruten sus clases. Gracias. Thank you.
Great. And one to hand off to Dakari Howard with Chicago Food Policy Action Council as well.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Dakari Howard, and I serve as the Supply Chain Development Specialist with the Chicago Food Policy Action Council. Before we get started, we typically begin with a land acknowledgement. And we do this by just showing respect to the original stewards of the land that we occupy here. And I'll begin by saying we want to recognize and honor that Chicago has long been a center for trade and conviviality and acknowledge the original caretakers of this land, the three Fire Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi, and also the Miami, Anoka, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee. The Chicagoland area is home to over 65,000 Native Americans, survivors of attempted genocide and forced displacement, that despite all that are still here, protecting water, air, land, seeds, and stories for the next generations to come. To support the justice work in the Chicago Native community, please consider donating to Chi Nations Youth Council via their Venmo at Chi Nations. And so here we see pictured Enrique Orozco, Marley Wilson, Steph Funk, Roger Cooley, who was just hosting us and welcoming us into the space, and some guy from Auburn Gresham, Dakari Howard. And about the council, the Chicago Food Policy Action Council co-develops, facilitates, and advocates and supports the implementation of policies to manifest food justice and sovereignty across the Chicago region. Oops. We also begin because we serve as a point of intersection between various stakeholders, researchers, community members, chefs, food preparers, food advocacy, food policy advocates, et cetera. We need to figure out what are some community practices, community commitments. And these are some of the ones that we really stick to. Beginning by saying that we can't be articulate all the time. Be an active inquiry about how your personal identities and positions within hierarchies of privilege impact and influence collective space. One diva, one mic, centering a culture of care. No one knows everything, but together we know a lot. Please do what you need to do to prioritize your self-care. Move up, move aside, and anticipate discomfort and hold a courageous space. And so I'll begin just by giving an overview of what to expect today in our sessions. Right now, we're in the process of doing our welcoming remarks and introducing folks to the Good Food Purchasing Initiative who may not be as familiar. This is emphasis instead of repetition, I always say, because it's constantly developing and it's constantly needing to be re-emphasized about what are some of the points that we're making and how are they developing with added perspective from our various partners and stakeholders that we engage with, et cetera. So we'll be doing that from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. We have our breakout sessions from 11:15 to 12 p.m. Then we'll have our lunch and virtual vendor fair from 12 o'clock to 1:15 p.m. Again, we'll return with some breakouts from 1:30 p.m. to 2:15 p.m. And then we'll wrap with Inspiring Connections and Local Food closing panel. That'll be from 2:30 to 3:15 p.m. Then we'll close today's sessions, and then we'll talk about the next steps upcoming just generally, and then also for our part 2, which will be held on Monday, June 27th. And so for that June 27th date, we'll also be doing welcoming remarks. We'll have an in-person vendor fair at this event, and that'll be held from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. We'll have lunch from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. We will have rotational sessions ongoing between 1:15 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. We'll be doing a needs and offers market held by the Culinary Collective, Mike Strode. We have culinary demos by Roberto Perez from Urban Pilon, Zach Engel from Galit, and Experimental Station is where we'll be hosting this event, and they'll be giving us a tour and just talking a little bit more about the space they occupy and some plans that they have upcoming. And then we'll wrap and close, and I hope that everybody's able to join us on Monday. It's going to be a day of food and fellowship, and a ton of connections being made at the various places that we intersect. Whether you're just generally a consumer of food, you operate and you engage with grocery stores, you prepare food, et cetera. This is a good opportunity for you to meet other neighbors that we have here within the Chicago Food Shed. And so why this event? Building relationships is number one. I think that when we are engaging with food sovereignty and food accessibility work, we work with folks who are aligned with our values, and we want to be able to cast a wider net to bring in other folks who have aligned values and what it means to have an equitable, accessible place of food and how other folks get engaged with that food. And we want everybody to know one another so that it's not such a siloed occurrence of like selling food and buying food. It's like we know who we're operating with. Sharing resources and information, which is a part of that relationship building process. Creating some dialogue around how to make the good food purchasing policy of service to community. This is a policy that's not to be subjugated onto people. This is a policy that's to be developed by people. The more influence that we have, the better I think this tool will be for community development. Working together to shape the Good Food Person Initiative for our collective benefit. To that same point that I was just making before, the more voices that we have on this, the more inclusive it'll be. So we welcome everybody to contribute to the content that we're sharing today, reviewing the policy itself, and just saying what are some gaps that we're seeing and how can we fill those gaps? How can we bring in folks to engage and support how we carry on this policy going forward? Communicating our aligned needs and values, fostering a more resilient, equitable, and sustainable local food ecosystem. Big shout out to our planning partners from IIT, Illinois Institute of Technology, Galit, Roosevelt University, the Doula Part, Street Vendors Association, the Common Market, Urban Growers Collective, Grow Greater Inglewood, the Community Food Navigator.
Nuestros socios, un agradecimiento.
Community Food Navigator, we have the Experimental Station, Cook County Public Health, and City of Chicago. And just to now begin explaining what the Metro Chicago Good Food Person Initiative is. We begin by this, what our mission is. We work to ensure that the places feeding our communities purchase food that advances a good food system for all. A good food system is accessible, equitable, racially just, healthy, fair, local, humane, and sustainable. Our vision is this: we envision a food system where our community institutions support and contribute to building the collective power of those structurally excluded from control over food production and access to imagine, build, and tend to a liberatory food shed. And when we use these terms, we just want to be clear on what we mean by this. We envision a food system where our community institutions support and contribute to building collective power for those who are structurally been excluded from the control over food production, access to imagine, build, and tend to a liberatory food shed. So more specifically, structurally excluded, we mean meal recipients, food workers, Black, Indigenous, Latina, Latinx, people of color, BIPOC, in short, producers, suppliers and growers, activists for animal welfare and environmental justice, and communities with targeted disinvestment historically and currently. And a liberatory food shed, we mean a local food ecosystem free from social and economic oppression, rooted in accountability, reconciliation, and healing. And now I'll pass it over to Marley to explain more about the Good Food Purchasing Policy.
Thank you, Dakari, and good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Marley Wilson. I'm also with the Chicago Food Policy Action Council. I'm the Good Food Purchasing Project Manager. And so our Metro Chicago Good Food Purchasing Initiative is really built on the local policy adoption of the Good Food Purchasing Policy by the City of Chicago and Cook County. This policy is transforming the way public institutions purchase food by creating a transparent and equitable food system built on 5 core values: local economies, environmental sustainability, a valued workforce, animal welfare, and health and nutrition. And we partner with our national partners at the Center for Good Food Purchasing, who support this policy implementation all across the country. And actually, if you could go back a slide, Dakari, thank you. So just to review the values that are incorporated in the Good Food Purchasing program that our public institutions are now adopting. They're focusing on how they can promote health, not just in the foods that are sourced and purchased, but also in how those foods are prepared and served. They're thinking about sourcing more food from environmentally sustainable sources, as well as how they can reduce their carbon and water footprint overall. They're thinking about how they can really invest in safe and healthy working conditions and fair wages for all food chain workers across the supply chain. They're thinking about how they can invest their purchasing dollars in the local economy, especially in an investment in small growers, especially Black, Indigenous, Latinx, people of color that are growing food within our region and our county. And they're thinking about animal welfare and how we can reduce overall the amount of meat, animal protein that we're serving, but also shifting the animal protein that we do serve towards more healthy and humane sources. Next slide. All right, so we're not alone in the Chicago food shed in looking at the Good Food Purchasing Policy and adopting it. We are joined by institutions all across the country that have been adopting this same policy. And our partners at the Center for Good Food Purchasing are working with over 57 institutions now in 24 cities, and over across that whole landscape, they're analyzing $1 billion of food every year. So you can imagine that collectively we have such an intense amount of power if we really just begin to shift even a fraction of that overall food spend towards these values. And we're very grateful for the support that we receive from the Food Chain Workers Alliance and the Heal Food Alliance, who help organize and support coalitions that are advocating for this policy and leveraging this policy for change all across the country. So as I mentioned, back in 2017, the city of Chicago, the Chicago Public Schools, and the Chicago Park District all adopted the Good Food Purchasing Policy, followed by Cook County. Their Board of Commissioners adopted the policy in May of 2018 as a resolution. So we are so fortunate that across both the city and the county, all public departments and agencies are working towards shifting their food spend towards the good food purchasing values. And that includes, our school meals, our senior meals, emergency meals that are provided through the city, after school and summer meals provided through the Park District. It includes the city colleges and Cook County Health and the Juvenile Temporary Detention Center and the jails. And so it's a really broad policy, and I will get more into the landscape of all of the institutions that have adopted the Good Food Purchasing Policy in the session on becoming a vendor or concessionaire with institutions at a little bit later this morning at 11:15. So if you're interested in learning more about who's been involved and what they're doing, just a quick plug to join our session later. Next slide. So the Metro Chicago Good Food Purchasing Initiative recognizes that this policy has a lot of potential power, but we as a community really need to leverage that policy for change. And that means that just implementing the Good Food Purchasing Program is really not enough. It's really wonderful and amazing that our public institutions are setting goals to shift their food spend towards these values, but we're really recognizing that we need to be really intentionally looking at the overall procurement laws, policies, and procedures, and identifying ways that they could be more aligned with the values. We're looking at how do we leverage this policy for equitable supply chain development. So events like this, and how are we helping to build more funds to support especially BIPOC farms and food businesses that might want to sell through the institutional market channel at some point. And then good food culture building. So how do we shift the culture around community food access sites that are run by our public institutions or private institutions to be more accountable to meal program recipients, to food chain workers, and those that are growing and producing our food. And all of that is, I think, really, it's really important that we have a clear structure for how this whole initiative that includes dozens of organizations and partners, how do we ensure that decision-making around the initiative's resources and priorities are led by those that are structurally excluded from the food system? And so that's really what we're working on as part of the Metro Chicago Good Food Purchasing Initiative over the next 3 years. And we are very grateful. We just want to give a quick shout out to some of the organizations, funders, and federal and state money that we've received to help really move the Good Food Purchasing Initiative forward. That includes the USDA Ag Marketing Services Local Food Promotion Program, the Illinois Specialty Crop Block Grant, the Food Land Opportunity Grant, the Illinois State Physical Activity and Nutrition Grant that we partner with the Illinois Public Health Institute on, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Builders Initiative. So thank you all for investing in this work. And I'll turn it back over to Dakari to introduce our special speaker.
Yes, so cool. We're about to introduce Erica Allen. Erica Allen is the co-founder and CEO of operations for the Urban Growers Collective, the president of the Green Era Educational Non-for-Profit, the co-owner of the Green Era Sustainability Partners. Previously, Erica founded and was the director of Growing Power Chicago for about 15 years. Erica is the co-founder of the Chicago Food Policy Action Council, AKS, and serves as the board of the Grow Greater Englewood and the Leadership Council for Growing Home, and is the advisor for the Community Food Navigator Project, among many hats. And she's recently received the James Beard Award for leadership in a more equitable food system. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Erica Allen. I'll stop sharing screen and let Erica take the floor.
Good morning. It's going to take me just a second to get my screen here ready to roll for y'all. There we go. Can you see my screen? Or are you looking at you might be looking at something different. There we go. All right. There we go. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Looks good.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm going to pretend that you're all here where I can see you. Can you all see me too? All right, excellent. So I'm going to share a little bit about the work that, thank you, Dakari and CivTech and the team and everybody who supports this work. This has been, the good food purchasing policy has really been a long process of just aligning resources, public resources, so that, all of the kind of racial and social equity work that we've all been collectively doing for 20 plus years can align with the opportunities for, I call it reparational economic opportunity, where folks who are in medical facilities that are receiving resources, food security resources, are able to get the highest quality, most nutritionally dense local food, and that we're really circulating those resources in ways that really elevate and create more opportunities for economic development. As we all know, the root cause of a lot of challenges is, poverty. And poverty, unfortunately, in this country and globally is, there's a lot of intersectionality with racial dynamics and historic, abuse of labor and environmental systems. So I kind of have to always say that a little bit, and because I think it's an important frame to understand the work that I do and sort of the and I, pronoun wise, I'm a she, her, we, and I really lean more into the we when I'm speaking. I'm a representative of a large body of folks who are all different levels of experience and knowledge and discipline. We collectively work on these issues, and I think it's important that that we continue to elevate that when we're talking about policy. We're talking about food systems. We're really talking about the folks who are growing the food, preparing it, moving it to and fro, that are often invisible in our conversations. This is one of the reasons that we use this symbol that is a little bit abstract. It looks a little like an avocado, but it's actually a drinking gourd, as part of our ethos as an organization, as a collective, around pathways to freedom. And so thinking about that as a constant reminder of the constellations and sort of the things that have motivated and have led us to having these kinds of conversations, and how powerful they are, that we have collectively been able to begin having to be, reasonably well resourced, to have, kind of hit the point historically where there's much more clarity around the importance of decentralized food systems, and that the folks that have been most, I'll just say abused, because that's probably the most abused by the food system, are now leading some of this innovative work in a way that is, really, really important to continue to bring into conversations. So I wanted to kind of begin with this note and this concept, because it's a really powerful concept of a lot of the things that we're doing as an organization, I think as a movement, are really about reclaiming some of the cooperative economics, some of the things that our great grandparents did to survive, how they worked on the land, how there was interdependency and bartering and sharing, and kind of folks wanted to go out and make more money, they did. But if we have our farms and we have our ability to circulate our resources and share resources, it really changes the ability of our communities, our neighborhoods, our blocks, within the urban setting that we work in, or even peri-urban with our rural partners, to really be able to resurrect some of those pieces and integrate them with current technology. And that's kind of, that's the way I think of it. This is as an artist and as somebody who is I consider myself a problem solver who grew up farming. So, I'm not really a farmer, but I am. And I know how, I have a lot of skills in that arena, but I think through and I'm a strong advocate of interdisciplinary work, and how we kind of conceptualize and share a vision of the kind of world, the kind of community we want to live in, is really important. So that constant thinking of the past, what did we learn didn't work and what didn't work from something we did a year ago, 10 years ago, 100 years ago, and so on, and how can we look forward with that knowledge. So the Sankofa concept, which is a Ghanaian concept, West African concept, is an incredibly important one to, I think, for all of us within sustainable systems to kind of remember and to continue to uphold. And to that end, and because we have that philosophy, we directly work on some of these structural inequities within our work. This is our mission, which I think is important, that we're always using creativity. Things are never quite the way we want them to be, but that moving towards, sort of this balanced system that is based and able to kind of begin to open spaces within the current food system, while we're building a new food system that is much more reflective of our values. So a big part of our work is this is a picture of our new crew, our apprentices. We've shifted into kind of Sankofa, to an old school model of apprenticing, which we've done with our youth corps over the years. So I'll just touch very lightly on all of our kind of programs, but it's a really important I'll call it a cultural practice of knowledge sharing, that when you take on apprentices, you're really sharing what you're learning and passing on those skills, and knowing that can't happen in 1 year. It's years and years of training and application and trial and error. And it's a lot more, I think, effective in beginning to integrate cooperative economics, which is what we're doing with our apprentice program. So that, the work doesn't fall on one person's plot, and this is my plot, this is my territory, this is where I work, and the people I work with come and work in this space, and maybe I'll cooperate with other folks, but I don't have to. We're really building in, like, you really can't do this work without cooperating, without having a multitude of people who are contributing, and how important that is to be able to collectively catch up with the amount of knowledge that we've lost generationally with the loss of family farms. So I grew up farming. I grew up, learning and relearning with my dad and my mom and all of those. I have that privilege. And I moved to the city and didn't ever think I'd be doing food. But because of the challenges of being able to do just to even do any do art or work in community, and seeing that there really was not a lot of food being grown. There's so much knowledge lost. And then with 9/11, which for me was right around when I activated my shift into doing food work and working with Roger and others, this is like 22 years ago, was really based on like a need, like, well, somebody's got to do this. And there's what we're being, kind of shown is such small production that if there was a crisis, we wouldn't be able to feed ourselves. And we've just experienced that, right? The pandemic really showed us the vulnerabilities in our system, which many of us knew already. But to have that level of stress and to see how disorganized we were as a community, that the emergency systems weren't prepared for what we all did our best to respond to, I think has really created a unique opportunity to really align with all of the different kind of institutional and community-based opportunities, because people are wanting to contribute and see the importance of it. And now with fuel prices, it's becoming even more of a critical time where we really need to address not only the food insecurity, but also the economics, the false economics that make it seem like food should be cheap, when we all know that it is not cheap if it's being done equitably. So some of these statistics and information are pieces that kind of the data that kind of that we can now share that backs up this kind of local knowledge, things that we know that doesn't require a research study to prove that having a local multi kind of scale food system is not only a good idea for just to meet everybody in a just and equitable way, but also it just really makes a lot of sense in terms of making sure that everybody has equitable access to healthy, affordable, culturally reflective, and nourishing foods that are accessible and affordable. So some of the things that we kind of talk about in our work and think about a lot are just that some of the metrics that are applied to even just identifying where there's low food access and why is can I afford the food even if it's there? Can I get to the store? Does this food nourish me? We can see this in not to pick on school lunches, but they are technically nourishing. They meet the food pyramid guidelines, but aren't necessarily culturally reflective or the most nutritionally dense foods that we could be feeding our children. And so because of the cost. So we just know that some of these things don't really align with the needs of the community, which gives us a great opportunity to activate some of these things that I've already discussed. Multi-generational apprenticing, education training, and then just beginning to build a kind of an ethos and understanding of what wealth building is. And it is very difficult to build wealth if you don't own property. We're strong proponents of cooperatively owned property and moving into family property to be able to scaffold some of the other pieces that are needed to be, self-sufficient, to have agency, to be rooted in a community, and not to be sort of displaced when there's gentrification or improvements and much needed services that community, need. And urban agriculture, some of the innovative community-based approaches are kind of moving along, and that of course repeats the cycle and reinforces some of the historic redlining practices that we are trying to eliminate and really ground folks in community through agriculture and food systems. So one of the programs and projects that we were privileged to participate in was a 3-year kind of study / intervention that really kind of created some great data, and also for UGC, for Urban Growers Collective, really allowed us to kind of lean into our pathway around healing, creating space for the men who self-enrolled in the program who are, trying to shift their lives and get services to be able to break the cycle of reincarceration, and also to really kind of have the space to, reimagine other kinds of pathways in life. And our programs, self-reported from many of the participants, were that it was some of the most impactful, healing work that they experienced. Take note of the cost. And if we were able to monetize and shift some of these costs, these are great baseline salaries for somebody who could be growing on a block and supporting food security and having agency. So we have the resources. We know that when we grow in on spaces that are not being or neglected, or just not active, that and you displace or fill those spaces with positive community centered activity, that it really does create these opportunities for growth and development. So we know this. There's some data. There's economics and cost savings for our more conservative fiscal folks who are looking to see how public and private partnerships can really support programs like GFPP and moving more into the GFPI arena around integrating more of the kind of social determinants of health, and making sure that we're centering and scaling, from the block level mutual aid up to commercial procurement opportunities. So we do some of these things. These are all interconnected, and create opportunities for a more robust food system and kind of food security web, and of course, opportunities for wealth building with the opportunities that we're providing. We always start baseline, emergency food, finding ways to bring food to folks in consistent and, removing all barriers. We distribute now through some generous funding, individual funding, and also some state funding. We distribute about $30,000 worth of $10 vouchers per month to vulnerable communities and partners at the Fresh Move sites. So that is a lot of food, and it is a great opportunity for our production to directly go to those communities stops, and we know how we're growing the food, the nutritional density, the cultural opportunities to connect with the whole food, and then to also support our collective supported agriculture, which is we have 25 distributions that we just kicked off last week with our partners and Squad collective partner, Grow Greater Englewood, for Englewood residents. And also it's a feeder opportunity for our apprentices to be able to begin, I use quotes, sell to our CSA, our collective supported agriculture, to build a fund that they will use as seed capital to build out their cooperative as part of their training. So just this idea of elevating and learning, again, Sankofa as a concept, what we had to do 5 years ago is not what we're doing today, because we've learned and we've grown. And that we're always pivoting based on the social, environmental, political impacts within our system, and the kind of evolution and capacity of our partners in our community. Mutual aid is incredibly important, and it's something that really is a baseline for having more cooperative economics, and to also be able to to sort of build these pathways for the amazing opportunities that are opening up within institutional purchasing. So we know for us as an organization, we're one of the larger urban farming operations as a 501c3 in Chicago, and probably one of the oldest at this point. And we are still building our capacity, because we are not just operating on one linear plane, but we're operating on all of these different elements that are required to really have a full food system. that includes urban agriculture, but also
incluye la agricultura, así es que,
but also includes
también
food distribution
incluye la distribución
and
de la
all the
comida
policies that
y las pólizas
that
que,
interact with I think I'm hearing some thank you that interact with all of our communities.
Todas nuestras comunidades.
So this is sharing a little bit more about just the kind of the depth and scope of the work. You know, this is an old picture of the South Chicago farm, but being able to farm on public land and also being able to exemplify how a community centered and operated farm becomes a public benefit for all citizens of Chicago, but also is being replicated in other parks. So I'm thinking of some of the work that La Vejo is doing in La Velita Park. They're establishing a community farm. And because we set this precedent in South Chicago, that it becomes easier for the next generation of growers to be able to replicate some of this work. I love showing this picture because it's our old school heating system and how we grow food year round in our hoop houses, which we construct ourselves and have that capacity to be able to grow. This is, you know, you can see all the shadow of the compost surrounding this hoop house, and there's snow everywhere, and you can kind of see the early chickweed popping up, which is such a compliment that nature gives us this nutritious secondary crop that we did not plan, that we eat and harvest in the early spring. Malcolm Evans, who's our farm director, did some experiments of doing some intercropping with carrots to do a secondary crop. We're doing all of these things on our farms, and not just for our own operation, but as a mission-driven 501c3 to perfect and to share these technologies with growers. This is kind of an iconic image from my father's work in Milwaukee, where he coined the term living biological worm systems, and really just the idea of working and harnessing nature to create fertility. Our work is built on those shoulders and on that foundation, where we're moving into herbalism and growing medicinal herbs, being able to connect culturally with other arts organizations like Red Clay Dance Company, who were doing a series of community kind of education and movement and organizing events, and also you know, performances. And you know, as working as an artivist and as somebody who which I love that terminology, it's very West Coast, but so glad that it's now in Chicago. You know, being able to impact policy like Art in the Farm, which I established in 2005, and really set the kind of tone around how public space, how the commons can be used not only for food production, but to bring youth from the South and West sides downtown with agency and purpose, that food is important. It should be part of our, not just sort of off somewhere else, but part of our landscape, and that having the opportunity, this is an old picture, you see all the construction, but you can, you know, sort of imagine, you know, having young people who would say to me, I've never been downtown, and they're 16, I'd never seen the lake, and being 16 and growing up in Chicago. You know, how intense that is to hear that, but also to know that this work, you know, provides that opportunity to remove some of those barriers, and then to be able to have agency again, to be able to be in control of a space that is for everybody in Chicago. And for our young people to be celebrated for their ability to, you know, to put seeds in the ground and harvest tremendous amounts of food in a small, you know, relatively small space, and to exemplify the beauty of working in harmony with the earth, and what that says about us as a culture, as a city, that we're able to do all of these things in one space, and that these kinds of beautiful gardens should not just be downtown, but in all of our communities. And we're getting there. We're moving more of this production. There's a whole generation of young people who are passionate about equity and nature and environment, and finding really brilliant ways to also bring folks into this work, regardless of medical status, regardless of legal status, all of those things, because food is a basic human right. To that end, we're all part of this community food navigator work that really was sprung out of the work that CFPAC has been doing historically, to really create the opportunity for millions of eaters and potential growers to be in community with one another. This has been a powerful and, kind of has increased all of our bandwidth to really think about how we can use technology not to replace our relationship building, to really kind of create more connectivity, because we have a big city and we have a big bioregion. So to be able to work as stewards to create new ways of collaborating collectively, and also to support squads and folks who have shared ethoses, to be able to find each other and to share information and to also protect those relationships. We're working with UIC Climate Justice Research this is aligned work, and with the Navigator work as well, but just trying to understand what in our land grant university here in Chicago, what kinds of opportunities there are to connect more with the community-based research that many of us have been doing for many years, and to not just be, kind of tapped for, there's a community element in a grant, let me get some letters of support and keep it moving, but to really, hey, I'd like to do some research on, how local procurement opportunities impact the environment. Who's interested in that? I'm interested in that research question. And I have 5 students in our Youth Corps program who are really interested in this and are potentially future researchers at UIC. And they'd like to start this work in high school. And what that means for building generational wealth and agency in our communities, because we are creating, a very long timeline, these opportunities to have not only health and wealth being produced in our communities, but in ways that balance and catalyze all kinds of other I call them baseline or foundational services that we assume, in the same way that we evolved food deserts, to fast food swamps, to really what it actually is food apartheid. That this separate but equal does not exist, and that there are real baseline inconsistencies within our own city around services. So to have the first full service health center for 40 years in a community as big and as robust as Auburn Gresham is problematic, but also an opportunity that is being resolved now. I love this. This is an old image of the Green Era site, and I didn't want to spend this time talking with you all about that project, but I did want to kind of contextualize with this image some of the robust urban agriculture, whether it's school gardens, church side, a couple raised beds where some greens are being grown, to larger scale urban agriculture collectives, cooperatives, farms. That Chicago is a robust growing city, and that with infrastructure, this is the new metro station that's being built in Auburn Gresham on 79th, the health hub, and then the Green Era campus. We really are setting ourselves up to address all of these issues in a scaled, with a scale. This is all private investment too. Scaled, big enough that we can generate capital and actually have the baseline materials like compost to take advantage of all of the opportunities that the Good Food Purchasing Policy and the GFPI, the initiative, is making possible, so that we have this closed loop system that we're able to consistently provide opportunities for how urban farming relates to wealth building and job creation and more agency. I'm interested in seeing folks own and operate, not only as workers, but us actually get shares of whatever profits are generated, as just the standard for all business, not just marginalized for not-for-profit work, just as good business practices in communities that need restoration, and that we have these huge wealth and life expectancy gaps. So this is how we're doing, and we're excited to be part of kind of a global conversation because of our ability now to generate, or soon to be ability to generate green energy and be part of a larger, highly local, but also a larger conversation about climate change, and how we can, just through stewarding our spaces and having more agency, that every person in Chicago can have a monetizable impact on climate by doing the work that we're all talking about. And that's a reality. Forward, thinking again of that Sankofa bird, looking forward, that we can co-create, and without losing sort of the identities and the cultural contributions that everybody can make and should make, because that's what makes I think Chicago so unique, that we have strong cultural identities in our neighborhoods and want to retain that, and also that we can collaborate and visit with one another and learn and cooperate and create really viable, exciting places to live and work, and positively contribute to the environment. And that is all I will share. And I have no idea how much time I have taken up. If there's questions, there's so many great partnerships. I have the privilege of speaking with at the Architecture Institute of America's conference on Saturday with I can see Alex Franz from Midwest Foods, folks from McCormick Place, and Green Era, to talk about the kind of the partnership that's emerging, but what that means for procurement, and being able to showcase how institutions purchasing mindfully from BIPOC growers, from small scale growers that are local, how that directly impacts to building community wealth and environmental stability in Chicago, and that can grow. We're just in the beginning of kind of beginning these very just relationships. I wanted to say equitable, but I like to kind of play with those two words, because I think we're still all coming to a consensus on how they work together. Equitable is just, I just get to be in a room with you at the same time. Just means that there's some provisions made so that I can fully contribute and participate, and not from working from behind, because we may not have the same access to resources within our practices, our businesses, our organizations, because of historic structural racism. And that's real and important for us to continue to hold up and to differentiate. And we're really grateful to be able to be in community and dialogue with folks who understand those things and are working to I was going to say manipulate, and I'm saying it anyway, but to really kind of expand and stretch some of the power levers that they have, knowing that it is difficult to kind of dismantle a system that is so embedded and so many of us are dependent on still. So it's an exciting problem. I think there's some really wonderful things that we're seeing possible and that we're working towards, that of course, as a trailblazing entity, that we now open it up for everybody else. And that I'm really grateful to Dakari and Marley and Roger and Steph and the whole team at CIFPAC for inviting me to share a little bit of my opinions and ideas and our work, and also just some of the visions of what we can do together as we begin to unpack some of these opportunities. And looking forward to sharing what some of the feedback we get from our discussion on Saturday with architects, knowing that what they see and what we share is going to impact many cities, and some of the thinking and opportunities that we hope to open up for our counterparts all over the country.
Thank you, Erica. I really resonated with that personally. I mean, I grew up in Auburn, Gresham, and along like the street light posts, you was seeing like the Sankofa's growing up. That was actually the first tattoo I ever got when I was like 17 illegally. But definitely beautiful to hear that. And if anybody has any questions to ask Erica or contribute, with any comments, please feel free. Now is a good time. Okay. Well, if not, then we could go on to saying thank you to Erica for an amazing keynote. Very grateful and very appreciative and very admirable work that Erica and the folks at Green Air and Urban Growth Collective are doing. So definitely a flagship for us to follow in the fight for like food mobilization and food accessibility work going on. Thank you.
You're welcome, and looking forward to tuning in and seeing everything that everyone is able to participate and share, and that this work continues to build. And appreciate you all.
Thanks, Erica. Okay, now we'll be going into a transition right before we hop into our next breakout sessions. They'll begin at 11:15 until 12. And then from 12 to 1:30, we'll be on a break and lunch where we'll also be doing a virtual vendor fair. But what to look forward to at 11:15 to 12, we'll be having 3 breakout sessions. One is becoming a vendor or concessionaire, which will be led by Regents Norwoods. Mobilizing Food and Community is going to be led by Eliana Bonilla and Weston Ashton. And then the third one is going to be Restaurants Advancing Industry Standards and Employment, which is going to be led by Manuel Villanueva. So I look forward to seeing everybody at 11:15 in the breakout sessions. Thank you.